Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session on eating with the seasons, where we're going to talk a lot about winter produce. This is part of sort of a larger group of sessions where we're talking about why it's important and how it can be helpful to your health to eat foods that are in the season that they are typically harvested. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and thank you for joining us. All right, so seasonal eating, I'm sure everybody, understands what that is definition-wise, but, essentially we're talking about produce, so fruits and vegetables, root vegetables, etc., that are purchased and consumed around the time they are harvested. So obviously each seed has a particular time when you plant it, when you work to grow it, and then when you harvest it. And so it is at its peak of its produce at that particular time of year, depending on what food you're talking about. Seasonal food overall is fresher because, of course, if you are taking fruits and vegetables from their vines, roots, etc., trees, at the time that they are supposed to come off, then they are at their life cycle, the most complete part of their life cycle. So they're going to have a fresher taste, probably a more intense taste overall. They're going to be ripe and perfect and ready to eat instead of where, sometimes I know that my family or my children really love strawberries and they only like so many fruits. So we're buying strawberries all year, but there's definitely a taste difference. We're down in Florida, so our strawberries are in season from, like late December to early March. And there's definitely a taste difference in the strawberries and look, actually, texture, the whole thing during that time versus all the rest of the year when we happen to be eating them as well. They're also more nutritious at this time because, again, each seed from whatever you're growing has a finite amount of nutrition in it. And so if you're growing that seed too short, too long, too big, etc., the amount of nutrient doesn't change. So if something is harvested at its peak season, then it's going to have the most possible nutrients that that particular seed is capable of having. If they're harvested early, which is often the case so that we can keep our grocery store shelves full, sometimes they're harvested a little early to like kind of continue the process off vine uh, by the time it gets to the grocery store. So that nutritional potency of that particular seed will be less than something that's allowed to grow its entire time that it's supposed to. Seasonal fruits and vegetables are also often produced by local farms and um, are often fresher because they don't have to sit on a truck for however many days to travel from this place to that place. So one of the things we talk about a lot is while it can be difficult to fit in a trip to a CSA or to a local farm, or maybe it's totally impossible depending on where you live, these fruits and vegetables do tend to be better for our health because they're not having to be sprayed with various pesticides to keep bugs out of the trucks. They're not refrigerated. They don't have different chemicals placed upon them that help them stay good so that they can go from the farm to the grocery store and into your refrigerator. So there is a lot of sort of health information related to that as well. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about fruits and vegetables, predominantly vegetables, because there are just more of them, especially for the winter season. But, typically what we're thinking about at this time of year for the freshest items are things that are root vegetables because the ground is frozen and cold in most places, right? Except, of course, where I live. But so we have to have vegetables, if you think about it, sort of realistically, it has to have a vegetable that has a very thick root because otherwise the root would die in the cold weather. So anything that comes on a thicker vine or a thicker root is probably at its peak season in the autumn or fall time season. So of course you can see some of the lists of different vegetables here, but in general, as with most fruits and vegetables, right, they have the most nutrient density per bite of most foods because not only do they house most of our vitamins, but they also have plenty of minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, and of course, fiber. Fiber is one of those things that the American diet is severely lacking in. And the more I read about it, the more I'm just like, oh my gosh, fiber does that too. And so, the recommendations for people are between 25 grams and 35 grams per day. And the average American is getting close to 6 to 8. So we know that that has a big impact on things like our blood glucose level, how full we're feeling from food, our digestive regularity, and actually quite a few other things. So, as much fiber as you can put in your diet, coming especially from natural sources, is a good idea. Other things that some of these vegetables do, when we think about different um, things that a vegetable does, right? Different colors represent different activities. So a lot of these um, autumn and winter vegetables are kind of our dark greens, dark purple, and those particular colored vegetables play a pretty big role in things like our immune system, cleaning out dead cells and making sure that our body is being used efficiently. It helps with our bone health and can even reduce systemic inflammation overall. So lots of good things there. So if you like things like beets or Brussels sprouts, cabbages, carrots, squashes, those things are all really good for our health during this time and of course throughout the year. Some of the most common fruits, and again, this is very dependent upon where you live. I'm in the southeastern part of the United States, so citrus is really big for us in peak season here, as well as some strawberries. Whereas, more in the Northeast, say, it's much more likely that you're going to see things that are coming from like apples, pears, pumpkins, those types of fruits for your peak season. And of course, one of the things that, makes it difficult to eat this way is that we're so used to getting whatever we want whenever we want it that it's hard to say, oh, I can only have strawberries for this time of year. I can only have oranges because we've become accustomed to be able to buying anything that we want any time of year, and it will just come from a different place, right? So um, when we're wanting strawberries in the summertime, they're probably coming from South America somewhere, which means that they're traveling quite long distances to get onto our grocery store shelves, and with the various other examples of that. So some good autumn dishes, usually you're thinking it's cold outside, so I want things that are hearty, creamy, have a lot of heat to them in one way or another. So some different ideas are things like creamy type pastas, and if you want to add some of our root vegetables in there, you could have some squashes and some pumpkins sautéed to go as part of that pasta. I see a lot of times pumpkin gnocchi or pumpkin ravioli, and some are better than others. But there's ways to mix those things together. Pork chops with apple and cinnamon. Lots of dishes that have hard grains like farro that you can mix with some root vegetables, say some eggplant, zucchini, and some sort of spice there. Uh, you know, Macaroni cheese is always great, but to make it a little healthier, you could add, say, some ground turkey or kale or something else that helps give it some nutrient density. The chicken pot pies and the casserole dishes are all warming foods and can be really nice during this time, including things like chilies, soups, and stews are also good for that. Another thing I really like about this time of year is that if I make a really large, say pot of chili, I can put maybe 4 servings together in separate containers and put it in the freezer for later, and it will stay for 4 to 6 months, allowing me a quick and easy lunch or dinner or what have you at home so that it reduces the number of times that I'm running out to eat. So spices are a big deal across the board when we're cooking or eating, and ultimately, I would say on average, when we go out to a restaurant, it's salt and pepper all the way, and neither one of those really have any, health benefits as far as some of the things that we're going to talk about with other spices. So it's really difficult to eat out and experience the benefits of these. But something I always like to remind people is, back in the 15 or 1400s. maybe a little later. I'm not quite sure when it was, but there was an entire war dedicated to spices because of their health properties. And I think we've really lost some of that in the um, lifestyle of eating out. So if you are someone who likes to cook or wants to learn more about cooking, look at spices and see how they can really benefit you in a variety of different ways. So, like you'll see this list here. I don't want to read it all, but allspice has anti-inflammatory properties. So when we are eating a lot of inflammatory foods like fried foods and seed oils and alcohol and high sugars, etc., we're creating systemic inflammation. And so, because of that, we experience some symptoms that go along with that. And so, trying to include anything that has anti inflammatory in it into our diet can help with some of that experience. Cardamom has a lot of anti-inflammatory, also has some lowering of blood pressure. I mean, these kinds of things are really interesting when you think about if we're not eating a lot of spices and we see all of these types of diseases or conditions, high blood pressure, systemic inflammation, memory problems, kidney diseases and or inflammation, and we can get some of the treatment from these spices, it makes sense for us to try to include that in our diet as much as possible. Cinnamon, very popular in the fall season, as well as cloves. Both of them have different things that they do. Cinnamon can help with cognitive function, lower glucose and cholesterol levels, which typically are high in the American diet, where cloves can help protect the liver from free radicals and reduce swelling related to gingivitis and help stimulate digestive enzymes, which are really helpful for proper and healthy digestion processes. And ginger can act as an anti-inflammatory. I'm sure everyone has heard of curcumin. That can also be used for some of those purposes as well. So, if you're ever interested, typing in a simple Google search of health benefits of spices, and it might be you might find some recipes or things that you would enjoy, and adding these things to your diet can only help you in that way. So some great starts for the fall. If you want to make some type of a soup, certainly having some olive oil, garlic, onion, celery, bone broth on hand, bouillon, etc. You can pretty much make any soup that you want with that start. For salad dressings, if you're interested in making your own, and I'll tell you, one of the greatest things you can probably do for, a small change for health would be to switch out salad dressings. For one, if you buy ones that are inexpensive, they have a lot of additives. In fact, when I looked at the food label for Hidden Valley Ranch, I want to say it had like 36 ingredients in it. So that's a lot, right? And we know it doesn't take that many, and predominantly those ingredients are additives, preservatives, other things that we probably don't need. And you can make a really delicious salad dressing in 2 minutes or less. I like this particular one where I take olive oil, I take some ginger, either fresh or a ginger paste, some honey, and some lemon juice. Add a little bit of water, shake it up, and pour it on my dressing, and it's delicious. You could add other things to that, and there's a lot of homemade um, salad dressing recipes. And at the end of the day, you can put these, you can make again a sizable container of it, and you can put it in the fridge, and it's going to stay for about a month or so. And so, you don't have to like make it every single night if you don't want to. Some casserole dishes, of course, like we said, those are very warming. So having things on hand like potatoes, milk, cream, carrots, breadcrumbs, they are generally in almost every casserole dish. But again, you can make several portions of it, and then that way you can freeze a few portions so that you have an easy dinner one night, or maybe you can take food to, what I do. I'm a sandwich generation person, so my parents are both 80 this year, and I also have two kids. So sometimes I'll make 2 or 4 servings or dishes of X casserole, and then I bring 1 or 2 over to my parents so that it's an easier dinner for them. But lots of other types of creamy casserole dishes. You can have things like, again, garlic and onion, bone broth, parsley, and sometimes the milk and cream, or even things like ricotta cheese, Parmesan cheese. Those are all good in a lot of different casserole dishes. So some health benefits of eating seasonally, I definitely mentioned a couple of them already, but in general, again, seasonal produce has more vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fiber, phytonutrients, and all of the other things that we need to help us reduce the risk of developing chronic diseases. So the more seasonal nutrition we're getting, the higher the nutrient density is, and that creates a better situation for when we're eating it. We also know that there are specific diseases and conditions that having this type of nutrient in our diet can help us with, right? So we talked a little bit about fiber and how it helps with digestion and preventing things like constipation. It also helps balance your blood glucose levels. But the phytochemicals in fruits and vegetables, those are kind of what helps create the color and also is part of the nutrient density, that many of them can help reduce inflammation and even reduce the risk of certain cancers. We know that when we eat seasonally, we're introducing ourselves to different flavors and ingredients throughout the year instead of just sort of eating the same thing every day. And we know that there is some connection to food diversity and total overall health. There's some early research showing that if we eat heavy strawberries for 3 months, that's different than eating them consistently throughout the year, and that perhaps, at least on some tiny level, it might be better to eat a whole bunch now, and then you kind of take a break from that, and then you get another hit of it. But again, this is very early research and a very small study, so I don't put too much into that. We also know that when we eat seasonally, we are most likely impacting positively our local economy because, generally speaking, local produce or seasonal produce comes locally. So that's a good thing. It also has a smaller environmental impact because, of course, if you're not having to ship containers of fruits and vegetables and other foods across county or state or even nationally, that's going to have a lesser impact on our environment. We know that when we eat seasonal produce, that more people will be encouraged to cook at home because it's sort of this whole process. It's like, oh, I'm going to get some local produce, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to cook it. Whereas when you buy things in the grocery store, sometimes I've been known to buy this beautiful thing of greens, and then a week later I look in and said, oh gosh, I never made that, and it goes right in the garbage. And that's a lot of money to throw away. I'm sure you all have seen some of the prices that are associated with eating this way. And so as much as we can, buying locally tends to be a little less expensive. It just takes a little more time. So, as with all things, it's time and money that we have to balance. But generally speaking, again, these types of fruits and vegetables are going to be fresher, have more flavor, and a richer flavor overall. So they'll taste more like strawberries. And I'll tell you, one of the things I definitely notice whenever I travel outside of the country is that the fruits and vegetables taste completely different. My daughter even said once, a couple summers ago, we went to Italy and we got some strawberries, and she said something along the lines of like, I'm just gonna have one of these, and we're driving somewhere, and I turn, when we get out of the car, I'm like, you ate all those strawberries? She's like, Mom, they were so good, I couldn't help myself, So, sometimes that can entice our young people to eat fresher foods as well, which, can sometimes be a struggle. We also know that seasonal produce is less likely to have been modified with chemicals because it does not have to get to a certain size. It does not have to travel. So usually we're using less chemical product on those types of foods as well, which certainly can be good for our health. So a good winter salad idea. I just thought I would share a few recipes that might be tasty for you for this time of year. So this is one of my favorite salads. It has a different name in various recipe websites, but basically what it is taking some Jacinto kale, which is that very dark sort of long leaf kale. You'll see it in your produce section, I would imagine. But I'll take that and I chop it up and then you kind of massage it with some lemon juice and oil because that gives the kale a little bit of a softer taste to it. And then once you're done with that, you can add whatever you want. So I personally like to add beets, Brussels sprouts, carrots, some shredded cabbage, maybe some apples. And then I add things like candied walnuts and goat cheese, and I put on that dressing. And I'll make like, again, I'll make a pretty large bowl of it. And then I put little containers of the dressing so that if I know I'm going to be out somewhere and I don't want to buy food or I'm, trying to sneak in some more vegetables, this is an easy grab and go that doesn't take a long time. But you can really make your salad however you want and put whatever items in it suit you. So this is a recipe for potato leek soup. So again, soups are pretty easy to make for the most part, as long as you have the proper ingredients. But for this particular one, we're getting some leeks, which, they come in big kind of stalks. So you get that, some, regular ingredients that you would have for soup, but, broth, garlic, onion, some cheese, some milk, adding some of the spices and cloves, maybe some thyme. So, if you're interested, there's many, many, many different recipes for soups online. So maybe find things that your family enjoys and trying to use some of those fresh seasonal vegetables when it calls for it. Here I have a butternut squash chili, which I really like because my kids don't really like squash, but if I put it in chili, they'll eat it. I think it's because they don't know what it is, but this is a really tasty recipe because the squash gives it sort of that autumn flair, so it's not so boring of meat and cheese, right? It has a little bit of a lighter taste to it, especially when you're adding things like the cumin along with the chili powder uh, and cinnamon flavoring. It has like a very interesting taste, and you might say like, oh my gosh, that sounds weird, and probably the first time I made it, I thought it would be weird too, but it is like my favorite chili. So you might want to take a picture of that or watch the recording later if you're so interested. The next one I have is a casserole dish, and again, there are hundreds and hundreds of casserole recipes that you can make, but this one's a pretty good one. It uses a lot of fresh items, onions, peppers, chicken breasts, and then of course some of those spices we spoke about earlier. So again, we're getting all of these spices in our food, so hopefully they're helping us with some of these conditions as they state that they can, at least on a small level. So when you're trying to eat seasonally, what I usually recommend to folks is that you look up what's seasonal in your area. So if you live in Massachusetts, then you might want to, there's a CSA in the state of Massachusetts, like a statewide one. I think it runs through Harvard perhaps, but you can look up the vegetables that are seasonal and you might even find a little calendar or wheel similar to what this one looks like that shows you for your area what is freshest. But you can also go to your local farmers and roadside stands. Now, of course, in the New England area, a lot of these are closed down from, say, November to March, but so you have to rely on other options. But in the summer and fall times, you could join a CSA where you get a certain number of vegetables each week or each month, however you set it up. There's lots of cooperative urban garden spaces and community gardens that pop up here and there that I think are pretty cool as well. And then, of course, if you are, thinking far enough in advance, then you can dry or freeze or can things that you want to save for a different part of the year when maybe they're not as fresh. So that's all I have for you today. I do see a few questions, so let me go ahead and answer those. Oh, good. Yes, the salad is very good. It's my favorite, and thank you on the chili. Yes, of course you can make it vegetarian. You could just remove the turkey, ground turkey, and then eat away. So thank you everybody for attending. If anyone has any other questions, I am happy to answer them.